Starfield is less than 2 months away, and while we've seen much of what the game has to offer, there's still some burning questions that I want to know about the game. From the mysterious magic abilities to the game's economy system and more. I'm going to discuss some of the biggest questions that I still have about Starfield. So be sure and let me know your thoughts and questions down in the comments below. Let's get started. One of the biggest burning questions that I know I had and many others had following the Starfield Direct was about the game's potential psionics or magic abilities, and how those may tie into the game's main story. During the Starfield Direct, our character was shown using a force-like power to lift enemies off the ground and throw them around. One of the big questions I had was whether or not these abilities are linked to that main Constellation questline, in which our character is tasked with finding old world artifacts. We know that our character discovers one of these old world artifacts seemingly at the beginning of the game, before the character creation takes place when our character is being spoken to by 2 other miners. And it would appear that we can see the artifact on the hip of the female space miner in the clip. From the gameplay footage that we've seen, these artifacts, when they're assembled together, form rings and spheres that seem to defy gravity, similar to what was showcased with the abilities. So are these ancient old world artifacts actually part of what gives us these powers? And if these abilities are linked, how many would we need to collect before we actually unlock these abilities in game? The more we unlock, will it become stronger and will we become more powerful? It's my thought and suspicion that these abilities will be integral to the game's main story, possibly unlocking new areas or advancing the story further. Something else that we saw in the Starfield Direct was we saw a shot of a 5th dot that appears in the game's menu, seemingly after the character gains these psionic abilities. Now, there have been theories that this 5th dot could represent a dedicated section for customizing and selecting these different powers, and meaning that Starfield may in fact have a developed magic system in the game, which could be a very interesting element, and is something I'm excited to see. While the exact nature and mechanics of this psionic/magic system in Starfield are still very speculative, it seems likely that it will play a significant role in the game's narrative and gameplay. The system could potentially offer you a wide range of powers or abilities, and could have a major impact on the game's story and universe as a whole. So be sure and let me know your thoughts on this system and the ancient artifacts as well. Another burning question that has been on the minds of many Starfield fans is, what happened to the Earth? From early gameplay footage, many speculated that we would be visiting Earth, or at least Earth's system. Clips showing the Mars rover helped to confirm that our solar system would be included in Starfield, or at least served as inspiration for those locations in game. From later interviews and gameplay reveals, we know that the Sol system, our Earth system, will be in Starfield and explorable in some way. Now, the Sol system in Starfield is known as the Old Neighborhood, and lead quest designer Will Shin has discussed that we will return to the Sol system early in the game to progress through the storyline, and will visit a city located on the planet Mars, with Will stating, quote, "You'll be sent there on a mission from Constellation to discover the mysteries of the artifacts, and you'll get in contact with the question of, what happened to Earth? But also, you'll go to Mars and there's actually a settlement, one of the early settlements that humanity created after they left Earth. It's called Cydonia, and there's a whole city with its own problems and people to meet." Now, as we learned in the deep dive, Cydonia is actually part of the United Colonies faction and serves as their largest mining facility. We know that within each system, all the subsequent planets and moons are supposed to be explorable. So I wonder, is there a chance that we'll be able to visit other planets from our solar system, such as our Earth, or Jupiter, or Saturn, or Uranus?
Just stop!
One key thing that Will said in the video was that Cydonia was an early settlement humanity created after leaving Earth, indicating that the Earth has been abandoned, which leaves me with the big question of, what is the deal with Earth? Is it uninhabitable now? Is it destroyed completely? Could Starfield's Earth be a callback to the Fallout series? Will it just be a barren, desolate wasteland for us to visit and look at? Or maybe it'll be so destroyed and toxic that we won't even be able to land on it at all. Clips that we've seen suggest that Earth may be now a barren wasteland, as we saw a clip of an arch which appears very similar to the Gateway Arch in St. Louis, Missouri. Is there a chance that we may see other large landmarks if we go back to visit? I think it would be really cool if so. However, these are only theories and speculations, so be sure and let me know what you think it could be and what happened to Earth in the comments. Throughout the Starfield gameplay we have seen thus far, we have seen a huge variety of interesting creatures that reside in the settled systems, from smaller insect-like creatures to large dinosaur-like ones that we'll encounter. Some will be docile and friendly, while others will be hostile and very dangerous. While Starfield has shown us many different alien creatures, we haven't yet seen any sentient, humanoid life forms. And my question is, will we get to see humanoid or human-like aliens in Starfield, or aliens of other races? From what we've seen so far, it appears that intelligent humanoid alien races will not be present in Starfield. If that ends up being true, I'm sure that'll be a very disappointing thing to many, including myself, which I think would be cool to see. However, given the scope of the game, I think just adding something like that may just add another layer of complexity that Bethesda just don't want to delve into. However, I think it would be interesting if we could just see some alternative races like we've seen in the Elder Scrolls. Maybe a planet of Khajiit or Argonian-like beings, or perhaps something brand new that we discover through the main questline, as we discover those artifacts and help to unlock the secrets of the universe. Possibly being able to contact another society of humanoid, hyper-intelligent alien creatures. While this is not evidence of those type of sentient creatures, we have seen a trait in Starfield called alien DNA. Now, while it's very likely and possible that it will refer to the creatures that we see in the gameplay trailers and gameplay so far, it could suggest that, hey, maybe it is a sign that we will see other types of life. Reddit user I Need a Fast Horse has also shared a screenshot of some of the graffiti in Neon City, which reads, "They are coming," which could be interpreted as a warning sign of a hostile alien race, but it could just be referring to some other group that wants to come and kill you in the settled systems. This is an area that I'm very curious about and very eager to see once the game is out, and maybe we will get an answer to that. So let's shift gears real quick and talk about the economy of Starfield. We know some information about the various components of the game's economy system, but one of the big questions I have is, how is it all going to fit together? How will surveying, outposts, and space piracy affect the economic system? Will we be able to purchase homes or start businesses like in previous games? These are all questions that I'm itching to know the answer to. Starfield will feature 1,000 different planets, and while only about 100 of them will have life, the rest will contain valuable resources and features that players can survey, acquire, and sell. Now, Bethesda wanted the number of planets containing life to be realistic, based on real scientific principles, but also wanted the remaining planets to have purpose. Now in Starfield, you can become sort of a hybrid space researcher and data analyst. Starfield considers various factors on the planet such as temperature, radiation, and other conditions. These planets have their own traits and geological features that are inherent to that planet. When you discover and land on a planet, you can then survey its flora, fauna, and different resources that you can actually later on sell in-game. And Todd Howard has said in an interview that this data is actually quite valuable, making it a viable option to earn credits in-game, which poses some interesting questions such as, how many different options will you have to sell the data? Will you need to collect data for different quests and decide how the data is going to be used, or who you want to give that data to? These elements could certainly add some interesting layers to the gameplay loop. Now, ships will also play a large part in the economy of Starfield. Now, ships and their customization are designed to be pretty expensive, especially when delving into the game's in-depth shipbuilder mode. Upgrading your ship requires individual parts, which cost credits, and certain upgrades require crew members, which suggests the need to maybe hire and recruit those crew members and have to pay them a salary. Now, while this isn't confirmed, it does say that you can hire crew members, but it doesn't necessarily say whether or not we're going to have to pay them, which I think could add another sort of element to the game, having to balance, are you bringing in enough money to pay your crew, and if not, are they going to leave? As we saw in the deep dive, we can also dock and steal enemy ships, then later customize or sell them. Now, if you steal a ship, you're going to have to first register it before you can customize or likely sell that ship. And Todd Howard has said this system is to try and help keep the game's economy from being broken. However, that does lead me to some questions about that system. I'm curious to know, how much can we get for selling these stolen ships and how easy will they be to sell? We saw in the Starfield Direct the Wanted skill, which has enemies hunt you down and try and kill you. Could you use the Wanted skill to eliminate the enemies that show up to hunt you, steal that ship, register it, and then sell it? Would that be like an unlimited cheat code for money? Can stolen ships be sold to only fences, or will they need to be registered and then sold to an actual reputable ship dealer? Is there a limit on the amount of credits that you can earn doing this method in a certain time period? These are all questions that are probably too deep for this video, but just something that I've just been thinking about as we learn more about the game. Now, we also know that outposts are going to be a huge component of Starfield's economy. These are like a home away from home for survival and resource generation. And you can set up modules in outposts to generate resources and potentially export these resources for income. And as we learned, you can assign or hire crew members to operate these outposts while you're away. Now, similar to operating your ship, will you need to pay your crew members for working at your outposts? And what about the money that you bring in from those modules? Will that money be automatically generated, or will we need to sell those materials that we obtain? Another interesting question I had about the game's economy system was, can we start or purchase businesses, or are outposts considered the businesses of Starfield? From the gameplay footage, we have seen the commerce trait, which indicates that you are better able to open and run a successful business. Now, to me, this sounds like we're going to be able to own and operate our own business. However, my biggest question is, what is actually considered a business in Starfield? I'm really curious as to what this will all entail. Are outposts considered a business? Can we possibly have a space shipping company? As we've learned that cargo missions are going to be a part of Starfield, I'm really curious to just see what all this is going to entail. Another question I had is, are we going to be able to purchase homes in Starfield outside of utilizing the starter home trait? I can imagine having a nice high-rise apartment in New Atlantis, or possibly just a sketchy apartment in Neon. There's also been hints that Starfield could feature a banking system, including the ability to take out loans. And this was actually seen in the starter home trait that I mentioned earlier, which comes with a 50,000 credit mortgage with the Gal Bank. Now, whether this banking idea is trait specific or has deeper implications throughout the game is not completely clear. However, I'm very interested to know, does this banking system extend beyond just the starter home trait and that 50,000 credit mortgage, and what impacts could that have if it runs deeper throughout the game? I also wonder if you'll be able to have the option to try and avoid paying the debt, and if they'll send mercenaries to try and collect it. I think that would be a pretty awesome gameplay mechanic, or maybe you'll even get arrested and you have to escape. I don't know, I think there's a lot of things that could be fun with that if they decided to include something about it. The remaining questions I had about Starfield are all about the boundaries of exploration. We know that exploration will be a massive part of Starfield, both in space and on the ground. As mentioned previously, Starfield will have 1,000 planets that we can visit and explore, but there are still lingering questions about that exploration. When on land, the continuous questions I have revolve around the possibility of dimensional limits. Specifically, after landing on a planet to explore, are there dimensional limits that you reach before you have to return to your ship and travel to a new spot? Are you able to explore the entire planet, or will you encounter an invisible wall that limits that exploration? Now, we learned from the Starfield Direct that traveling from system to system or planet to planet will be a bit more structured than just taking off and flying down to a new planet and landing. From what we've seen, to land on a planet, you're going to select that planet from your star map, zoom in on that planet, and select a landing zone, which can apparently be anywhere on that planet. Now, when you take off from or land on a planet or moon, you're going to see a cinematic of your ship doing so instead of you actually manually doing that yourself, which seems pretty clear so far. However, does that mean that we won't be able to fly our ship on the planet at all? Say if we land our ship in New Atlantis and we see something slightly in the distance that we want to go visit, are we going to be able to jump on our ship and do that without actually loading up that star map and having to find a new location to land at? From what I've seen so far, the answer is seemingly no, but it's not totally clear. And if the answer is no, I think that would be somewhat disappointing to myself and many others. However, it's just like I said, not totally clear. So if you have some better answers for me, be sure and let me know in the comments below, because I definitely don't know everything about this game and I'm still trying to learn everything that I can. It also leads me to some other questions that I have. What if we want to walk continuously and fully circle that planet, no matter how long it takes? Oceans and impassable mountains excluded. Some interesting speculation I've seen on Reddit came from a user named Of No Importance, who theorized the system could work like Daggerfalls, wherein you would choose anywhere on the map you wanted to go, then you would be placed in that location. Technically, you could walk from that location to wherever you wanted, encountering randomly generated geography and creatures. So there were no terrain boundaries, but exploring in that manner just wasn't inherently satisfying, and it was a lot more interesting to just fast travel where you wanted to go. Now, I thought this was a great theory, and unless it's confirmed somewhere I haven't seen it, seems like a likely probability for how it could work in Starfield as well. Now, the exploration boundaries between the ground and space are also something I've been very curious about, especially after watching a Todd Howard interview where he detailed a particular instance that he had in game. So listen to him describe it in this clip, and then we'll discuss.
Let's see, just a few weeks ago I landed on one of the early planets and this sandstorm blew through and I went to run away from it, and this, ships can randomly, once in a while they can randomly land, like enemy ships can land. So I'm going through the sandstorm, the ship landed, and I get in this firefight and I got on the ship, and while I'm shooting the guys on the surface of the planet, the ship took off into space. So now I'm in outer space on the ship, and I was just like, can that happen? I guess that can happen. Yeah.
Now, while that sounds like an incredible moment based on what he described, I just have so many questions about how that might work. Would the ship lifting off just fly around the planet, or would it go up into space leading to a loading screen, and then that event would just continue in space? Would you be fighting them in space once the loading screen ended? Was that a scripted event that was meant to be in the game, and so it was something that didn't happen spontaneously? I just feel like there are so many parts of the game's exploration system that we fully don't understand, and that just leaves me with so many questions. So be sure and let me know your thoughts. While these are not the full scope of questions that I have about Starfield, these are just 5 sort of topics or areas that I have just been continuously curious about since that Starfield Direct. So be sure and let me know what questions you still have about Starfield, and maybe I'll put together another video discussing the questions that I still have and you have about the game. Also, if you want a serious in-depth overview about Starfield, then be sure and check out my nearly hour-long preview for the game. Click on the video on your screen or link in the description. Thanks for watching, and be sure and subscribe for more Starfield content.